Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast. My name is Barbara Thompson. Each week, I'll be bringing you a self-care expert or a message to help you to discover how to live your best life and understand your mind-body connection. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let the Studio Chat begin. Thanks for joining me on episode 36 as I chat to Mike Campbell, a man coach. This is a really great episode if you're wanting to know a bit more about the man in your life, how we can help them. But I really was excited to chat with Mike today because I feel that in our life, it really helps us to understand a little bit more about how we can celebrate men, support them, and appreciate them. And we talk about what the alpha male is, what do men really want, what troubles are the modern man or men facing today. We touch on toxic relationships. Also, are guys really intimidated by women who are strong? And we have a really good discussion. It was really refreshing to hear from a male's point of view and a man coach how a lot of the things that I see in my studio with my ladies are the same things that Mike can also see with the guys around him in his business. Let's dive in to episode 36 with Mike Campbell. Hey guys, today on my podcast, I have Mike with me. How are you doing today, Mike?
I am wonderful. Thanks, Barb. How are you?
I'm good, and I've been doing a bit of stalking on Instagram with Mike, and he came up on my feed a few months ago, and as you ladies know that most of you listen to my podcast to do with the mind-body connection, how you can really listen to your intuition, listen to how to live your best life, but also we do focus quite a bit on boundaries and how other relationships with other people can affect us if they're not the right people as well. And obviously men play a large role in our lives, and I really want to highlight that side. So that's why I've asked you on my podcast today, Mike. So can you please share with my listeners a bit about you and like what you do?
Sure. So okay, where shall I start? Hey, as you said, you've been doing a bit of a stalk. It's not really a stalk. This is what it is these days, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say this, but I'm not going to ask you to do it. But I would be interested to hear what you would say now that you've done your stalk. But look, okay. So I'm Mike. I'm a Kiwi. For those who you can probably pick that one up. I live in Australia, and so I'm a man coach. And that what usually brings a bit of a like, what the fuck is that? Excuse my French. And
you can on my podcast too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fucking A. So look, a little bit about me. Yes, I work with men as a men's coach, and it's kind of like, what is that? And the simplest way I'll describe that is, help everyday men get the shit together and understand themselves a hell of a lot more. What's blocking them, what's challenging them, how to navigate their lives so we can get more from life, from love, and from the everyday. And a little bit about me is kind of, I'm 40 now, and getting to this point and where I am now, a lot, I can probably explain, perhaps what is men's coaching, but that's the summary of it, really. We can probably make it sound many different ways, but that's it, helping men get the shit together. Plenty of people get into that kind of stuff through some maybe big moment, perhaps in their life, or some kind of rock bottom, perhaps, and I don't really have that story. I mean, I've certainly got shit that I've been through and all that, but I think more so for me getting to doing this work, I've been in it for about 10 years now, but prior to that, it was kind of just a slow evolution of me as a person, as a man, and also I suppose as a male, and then like really stepping into being a man. But then also I had worked for many years as a personal trainer. I went to university and got a physical education degree and came out very interested in the body, but very interested in the body, but also quite directionless and, like fairly, just cruising and floating, that kind of Kiwi attitude of like, just figure it out. I played rugby and I went to Otago and all those kind of things, but I was just kind of stumbling one night out in front of the other, really. And but I've always been very, very curious. And so for me, the body's interesting. Wow, this is fascinating. And then I started working with people as a personal trainer when I got to uni, and it was like, oh shit, okay. So I work with bodies, but I don't really like the body's the thing. What I'm starting to uncover the more I do this is I work with the mind and I work with like the behavior and like what is driving, certainly at an emotional level, what's driving the desire for some kind of body change, I suppose. So doing that for many years was more a long, slow project in figuring out how do I solve the problem that this person is presenting me with. And often it sounds like it's a physical problem, but then it's not really. And now I became, more and more aware that often in life, the problem that presents is never really the problem. So I just kind of followed that curiosity of like solving the thing here. And that really led me into understanding like the behavior at a greater depth. And so it was about 2012 and I really started to look at what I was doing myself, and I was going through some big challenges. I had an engagement breakup, and my mother got very ill, and then soon passed away. And so there was a lot of self-reflection in and around this. But to kind of shorten the story a little, it led me to really going, what am I doing with my life? What am I good at? What do I give a shit about? And I really started to see, like, oh, I've been seeing the same shit all the time. Like it's this physical thing that presents in me, but it's mental and emotional. That's the thing. And what do we do about it? So I just kind of had to dive down that rabbit hole of like, oh, I've been solving the problems in this way and addressing like them and their lives and how they feel about themselves. So it feels like I really need to, double down on this and start working with men and understanding like what's driving us from a deeper level and what do we want for ourselves and how do we create that. So that's kind of the story on how I got to here. But that's kind of what I do in a sense. Who I am is a deeper, I suppose, question. But I'm very curious and I love, exploring my own depths and facilitating others and exploring theirs.
Because I think that depth, you never really get to the bottom of it. Like when you have one layer, then you get another layer, and then you're like, oh, I'm good. And then something else comes up. And do you still find that now where you are in life that you are still, I think it's a lifelong process that you, just as you think you nailed something else comes up and you're like, oh shit, that's connected to that.
Yeah, I mean, like without being frozen in like over analysis, which is pretty common, and I've spent a fair whack of my time there, and very common for a lot of guys, to be up in our heads. There's always, there's new depths and there's new layers and there's new levels. And I think, one of the challenges I think for a lot of people, especially men, is when we come to looking at ourselves, it's very fucking daunting for a lot of men to look at themselves, because very quickly anything that isn't kind of right or perfect fits into this mold of what I've learned that I need to be about myself automatically means I'm wrong, there's something wrong with me. And that's wildly vulnerable, because then it's like I'm not man enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not good enough, and there's so much often attached to that looking at it, it's ignorance is bliss. I just keep my head buried well and truly under the sand. And so then when we do start to look towards it, it can be like, okay, well, I just want to fix these things. You just want to fix these things. And I know women obviously have a lot of the same thoughts. I think they kind of manifest and come about in different ways. But the reality of them can be very similar, but they can look different. And maybe there's that kind of like, just get them done and then I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then I'm done and I'm fixed. But, of course, that's never the case. It's easy to say that, but to live in it, no, just this one thing. So I think, what really has supported me, certainly in the men that I work with, is, there's always new depths and there's always new levels available to us. One thing that challenged me 10 years ago doesn't really challenge me now, but new things do. And so the whole idea really in the depths is that I can then explore the things and navigate and address and handle the things that come my way. So I can perhaps take it, step up to a new level or face a new, piece of my own depth. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, we're an ongoing journey.
I know. Yeah.
Well, one day we're not.
I agree with that. And the reason why I'm chatting to you too is I want this to be about a celebration of men too, because to support them and appreciate them. And I think we all have a man in our lives, whether it's a significant other or an uncle or a cousin or a brother, or we could have children, and they're going to grow up into be men. And I just think you talk a lot about the alpha male and the one with the heart
and the one with the backbone. So, because your book, and I'm just going to read this so I don't get it wrong.
Go for
Your
it.
book, Unleash Your Alpha, and this is why I'm reading it, because I read it and was like, this is so cool. So it's about eat like a man, train like a beast, operate like, I'm smiling when I say this because I'm like, I like the sound of this guy. So eat like a man. Oh my God, it's even making me tongue-tied. Eat like a man, train like a beast, operate like a gentleman, and become a legend. And that was kind of about your book. And in your book, you talk about things that I talk about with women too in my studio: hormone health, sleep, nutrition, mindset, and wanting to, ask the questions, give yourself permission. What do you want to be? And go and do it, rather than just having to do things because you think that's what society says and you have to follow through because that's what you think everyone wants you to do. And I think there's been a huge shift in what it means to be a man today. And I know, as speaking from like the side of the females, is it's so confusing because we want a man that's strong and confident, healthy and masculine. But we find that today when we come across, I'm going to generalize a little bit, when we come across those guys,
go for it.
They're narcissistic pricks, and men that tend to want to care for themselves and look after themselves can be into those camps. So one of the first questions I've got for you is, what does being a man look like today?
I mean, that's the question, right? I think, look, okay, so there's probably no surprises that I've been asked questions like this many, many times over the years.
Yeah.
And it's, I think part of that is the challenge itself, is that, it isn't one thing. But for so long, we had it as one thing. It was to be like, we can keep talking about it for a long time, but in essence, it was kind of be strong and, this stoic, which it's not fucking stoic if you actually look at what the stoics are about, but, this kind of like, nothing phases me. I am, incredibly capable. I'm like fucking Superman. I have to be strong. I have to be able to handle everything, brush it off, no worries, no weaknesses, no vulnerabilities. That was kind of it, which isn't human. But at the same time, it's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and not actually embrace strength and, discipline and determination and, self-reliance and self-efficacy and all these things. But there's such a span to being a human. And of course, men and women are wildly the same. And we're very different in certain pieces, but we are more the same than we are different. So, I think the thing is that what it means to be a man, first of all, is broad. Most definitely. It is to the point that I used in the book. It's equal parts heart and backbone. And I think for a long time we kind of celebrated, reinforced, kind of really perpetuated this idea that it just needed to be the backbone. But like, we have a backbone and we have a heart. Now, of course, we also have a lot of men, and we, like through the 90s, we had this kind of like sensitive new age guy, then the kind of the metrosexual piece, and it was more about like this all heart. There's no fucking backbone there, right? And so I would say, even to expand upon the idea of heart and backbone, it's like heart and backbone, and then so much beyond that and in and around it, and the nuance between it. And so, how I tend to answer that question is perhaps somewhat infuriatingly, and that is, first of all, I actually think that what it means to be a man is to be your own man.
Yeah.
And that invites me to, first of all, figure out, who the fuck am I? And like, who do I want to be? And what is important to me? And what are those applications of strength and compassion, and curiosity and compassionate leadership and these things for me? And then, of course, that will look different in every man. And of course, all of his upbringing and everything is going to, influence this. But I think that invites us into finding the scope for us as individuals, because otherwise I am either trying to be this thing that I've learned, which is super, super common, or I'm potentially trying to be this new thing that I've learned, which is like, maybe the all heart, like fluffy, no substance to him. Like a leaf in the wind, which is what I see for a lot of men. It's like just blowing any way that life will take me.
Yeah.
And I'm overcommitted and I'm a people pleaser and all this kind of stuff. Or I'm in rejection of one of those things, but it's still influencing it. So it's still not actually allowing me to step into who I am. So for me, that's kind of what it what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I'm confused. So I hate being a guy, and I'm 42, so I'm a couple of years older than you. And I think, from that generation is I've seen growing up that a man's a man and he works and the mum stays home and they're very strong. And then you kind of saw the breakaway where the mums would do the lawns and then the mums would then stay at home dads, and you could see this whole thing. And I'm thinking, I see women on a daily basis and see what we struggle with. I feel like sometimes with men, I feel really sorry for them because I'm not a man, and I'm like, well, when I'm looking for my next relationship, I know exactly what I want, but still I'm conflicted in my head being like, what is a real man? Because of everything that I've been taught, and I've changed. I've worked hard for the last 42 years. A bit about me is to change all my wiring. I've broken family cycles, family patterns. That's why I live in Australia. And there's so many things to that, but that's at a base level that I've rewired myself. And because I've seen what I've come from, and I've gone, fuck no, there's no way. But coming from a really narcissistic psychopath freak of a father, that I obviously had replicated that in my marriage and had replicated that with the type of men that now at 42, and I've been single for 4 years, I have learned that, and I pass that on to some of my female clients. I say to them, this is just healthy relationship, and it's good, and have boundaries, and write your list very clear. Because a lot of people, I don't know if men are the same, but when women come and see me and they're like, oh, I want a boyfriend, I'd like a partner, I'd be like, fantastic, okay, well, what does he look like, and what does he do, and what's he like? Oh, no, I can't write that down. I'm like, well, how can you get it if you don't know what you want? You need to be clear. So when you meet it, these are my non-negotiables, these are my values, these are really important to me. And I'm surprised at the number, and I was like that too. I was like, oh, if someone paid interest in me and liked me, oh my God, I'm so lucky. No, fuck no, it needs to be the other way around. And I'm interested to know, with guys, do they, when they talk to you about relationships and stuff, are they similar? Do they have a list of what they want, or are they more, you said, the leaf in the wind, that, oh, this lady finds me attractive, so I'm going to go to her and discover that, rather than this is what I want and this is my non-negotiables?
Yeah, I mean, I think now we're probably getting into the level of the difference between, like where certain men's history and upbringings and the shit that they've been through has kind of, sent them down to pass. So there's definitely a difference, a wide difference. There is the men that absolutely know what they want because they're clear and they have done their work and they know, first of all, who they want to be. So then they can actually start to get a clear understanding of what they want in a relationship and what they want in a partner. And then there's the men who think they know what they want, but that's this idea of perhaps, what is a great looking relationship and a great looking partner and all these kind of things that might be more of an externalization of what it says about me. And then there's the men that have no fucking idea and that potentially would like to, but maybe they're absolutely terrified of rejection and they don't believe that they're good enough and they struggle to really, have any sense of self-worth and therefore allow themselves to want for anything because, of course, it could be taken away because I'm unlovable and all that kind of stuff. There's a very similar themes that you'll find through men and women, but I think a lot of the kind of origins and then manifestations might come out a bit differently. Yeah.
I like hearing that too, because a lot of us think that there's more men than women on the planet and it's easier for guys. Like, these are the stories that you hear. It's easier for men. Men can just click their fingers and go for younger women, or, all those type of stories. And thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important for females to know that guys go through this shit too. And I think part of it is now it's getting better to talk about it and see someone like you. But for a long time, it was just, I'll suck it up and just keep going, because, and maybe no one else feels like, and I think too, it'd be more like, oh, there is something wrong with me and no other man would, because you look around and think no other man feels the way I feel.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the simplest messages I think that I would encourage men to connect to, but those who are in relationship with men is, first of all, like, we all have shit. Doesn't matter who you are. Everyone's been through shit and everyone's got shit. But the challenge for a lot of men, and again, I know this plays out in a similar but different way for women, but the challenge for a lot of men is that we have learned for the longest time that we can't have shit. You need to be infallible, like that everything to everyone. And to show any kind of weakness or challenge or struggle is weak. It's less of a man. And that sounds extreme, but it's fairly part of the fucking water growing up, by and large, in the Western world. And unless there's the outliers, but if we look at the chunk in the middle of the bell curve, so to speak, and so that's very, very daunting. And so part of the narrative, and therefore what you take on, is like, anything that is less than or that isn't working out for me, is less than. It's something wrong with me, as I said earlier. So I just need to kind of keep that to myself and keep it under wraps. And what ends up happening is we start to wear this mask of who we think we're supposed to be, this idea of this kind of, super capable, strong man. And anything that doesn't fit into that, again, it needs to be hidden and kept away. And by the way, it's just, a process of self-rejection. But it means that I start to present to the world this idea of this dude who's got his shit together. And then I look out into the world and I see that. And I don't think for a moment that maybe every other dude is also presenting this mask to the world of the dude who has his shit together.
Yeah.
And so we just present, a bunch of masks kind of playing with each other. And it couldn't be more real that we all have shit. And, when certainly in my work, when we bring men in to explore themselves and to truly see themselves and allow themselves to be seen, one of the simplest things that is incredibly powerful for men is like, oh shit, me too. Like that guy's just like me. And so we can actually get on and talk about it and deal with it and confront it and face it. And then we can kind of start to move past it and get beyond it. But until that time, we're just going, everyone else has got their shit together. And of course, what does that do? It kind of further exacerbates the belief that there's definitely something wrong with me and I just need to keep it to myself and I can't see that. Because imagine if this was seen by people, oh my God, the judgment. So that is a very, very common mode of being. What it looks like on the outside could be the guy who's wildly insecure and very timid and passive. And it could be the guy who's wildly overt and arrogant and he's overcompensating for his insecurities. But a lot of the time it's the insecurity that's driving that in whatever it looks like.
Yeah. So we did speak about what troubles modern men today. It's feeling unwanted. And this was something that I got from your book, and it was something that I was like, really? Do men feel like that? So I'm just going to read it out. Feeling unwanted, not important, respected, or in control. And I was like, men feel, I think it's obviously when you're a certain gender, you kind of stay in your lane, and then it's kind of like, wow, like is that what you find, you deal with men on a daily basis? What troubles do you find today?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think at the essence of a lot of what we're talking about is that, again, this is a broad blanket to throw over it, but for the longest time, men have kind of learnt that we can't really be human. We need to be this very, very narrow, like shutting off any kind of emotional experience is inhuman.
It's got to go somewhere, isn't it?
Of course, right? And if you think, I like to, talk about it in a very simple and quite, let's call it blunt way. But if you imagine, like for me, and if there's an emotion that we swallow down and we swallow down and we swallow down and we swallow down, and the more shit you swallow down that you don't deal with, you're gonna at some point vomit it back up on someone, which we do.
Mm-hmm.
We act in our emotion and we vomit it out there into the world, or you're gonna shit your pants at some point. And this is what we will do, like we will be, we might weaponize our anger, or we might be like one of the biggest, let's say, because often the problem isn't the problem. One of the things that presents for a lot of men, certainly when you can tap into beneath the surface in their head, is that so many men are wildly, like insanely hard on themselves. And that will often be based on all of this stuff that we're talking about, but often the result of unprocessed shit that we haven't dealt with and our emotions. It either goes out there into the world or within ourselves. And so I think one of the things that we have been challenged by, which is, to be clear, not to kind of try and play victim and say woe is me, but certainly if you're a woman wanting to understand men, It helps to go, oh, yeah, maybe we have this idea that men need to be kind of like inhuman. As, women have had these ideas of beauty, let's say, that are inhuman a lot of the time, right? Like similar but different.
Yeah.
And so anything that doesn't fit that mold, it's going to weigh on you. It's going to be incredibly challenging. And it's going to lead to these ideas of like, well, I'm not good enough and I'm weak and there's something wrong with me and I'm not man enough and all that kind of stuff. So what comes into a lot of that is like, again, a lot of the things are very similar but slightly different for men and women. So like, for example, to the points that you shared there, Barb, that like, men feeling appreciated and respected is so big. But what often happens is, like we will go through our lives and our childhood and experience things and we'll often miss out on things. We talk about this idea of being wounded. For a lot of men and a lot of women, for a lot of people, we can often kind of come to this place of like feeling like who I am is not quite enough. And so that will again come out and manifest in different ways. But when undealt with, we will go out into the world and try and meet that need of being, loved and knowing that we're good enough and knowing that we're safe in effective ways. And that will often look like chasing validation and praise and, other kinds of external sources, money and status and power, different things often between men and women. Men, it's often those things of like power and status and money. The more I apply myself to achieve results, because it's so masculine to apply myself to achieve a result.
Yeah.
And so what lies at the heart of a lot of that is those things will allow me to be respected. And when I apply myself to those things, deep down in me is this desire to be appreciated, to know that how I put all my energy and life force into the world is valued. Of course, because then what value do I have to the community if I'm not given feedback that is valued? But so that's very, very, normal and animal and instinctual. But when all of our shit gets in the way, where I just deeply inside don't feel that I'm good enough, then I'm going to go out and into the world and try and seek, like really, really overcompensate for praise and appreciation and validation. But it's gone beyond that. Like, I need that healthy level of feedback of like who I am and how I'm showing up in the world is valued, to like, I have zero sense of self-worth and I need to be propped up by the things in my life or the feedback and the validation and the approval from others. So, again, often a lot of similar things, but those kind of slight differences in what's going on. And so, respect is a big one for me, and appreciation is a big one for me. And, to speak to perhaps a practical way of what that could look like, the idea really is not to go and, because this would be a common thing that I have heard would be like, oh, but then so is it my job to kind of prop up his fragile ego? It's like, absolutely, it is not your job. Like, fucking definitely not. But if you give a shit about someone, then do you want to let them know that you appreciate them? Because I tell you what, if you let the man in your life know that you appreciate him and you appreciate what about him and how he shows up for you, then he will fucking show up for you because it's fuel and it's energy. But of course, he may also have his work to do to make sure that's not the thing propping him up in his sense of self-worth and his sense of identity.
I love that. Yeah, I really love that. I think this is going to be I'm going to get a lot of feedback from this. People are like, oh my God, I had no idea, Barbara. It's kind of, because life is so, it's that kind of, we get to a certain age, we get married, and I know a lot of listeners, but a lot of personal friends that have been married for like 20 so years now, and they're all coming up to that point and they're all kind of like stuck, and this is a really healthy conversation to have, because I think it's important that it's the small things that matter the most sometimes, and it's just someone, that man in your life that, hey babe, thanks. Because the whole men and women thing, women nagging and all that kind of stuff, it's just to stop and think, especially the last couple of years, everyone's been through a tough time. Just turn to that man tonight and go, you know what, thanks. Like, just thank you. And he'll be like, what?
Yeah, and if you think about relationships, I think the idea really is to be partners, right? And of course, a partnership requires like both parties coming to the party. And if you're not, like working on life together, if you're not valuing similar things and going in the same direction, and then also, if you think about it from a business standpoint, like if you had two companies, two entities that were in a partnership and they didn't communicate and then talk about like what was working and what wasn't, strengths or weaknesses and feedback, it would fucking go into the ground. yet here we are with like one of the most fundamental and powerful aspects of being human, which is like, our hearts and love. Then of course we need to be in each other's corner, right? And so obviously we're talking about one side of
Yeah.
the equation. It goes both ways, but that's the idea. And so we want to be able to, like for example, the idea in relationships of love languages. What's the major idea? Like there's lots to it, and maybe there's a bit of nuance, but at the end of the day, the idea is to be able to speak to and communicate with your partner in a way that they get it, that they feel love and appreciation. So like that's worth finding out regardless of who you are, regardless of your gender and your relationship makeup. And so then to the slight more bit of nuance between men and women, it's like men, regardless of, let's say, of their love language, want to feel appreciated for who and how they are in the world, especially for how they show up for their partner. And so while there might be all sorts of shit, going on, and the dynamics and the shit in the past and any number of different situations for people listening in their relationships, I can tell you this, and that is at the heart of a man, like, yes, he might have a bunch of his shit in the way, but at the heart of a man is someone who wants to show up for you and look after you and make life safe and easy for you. It might look very different in the way he's gone about it. And often there's a lot of confusion in there that a bunch of conversations and potentially like some external eyes and ears and stuff could support and bring in clarity too. But that's what he wants more than anything. Like the working all hours is to provide. He's got a very narrow version of what that is, but that's often where the energy is, the intention. And so sometimes it's simply that clarity of intention. And when he knows that he's appreciated for that, it's fuel.
Wow. See, ladies, wow, that's powerful. Powerful stuff. Now, I've got a couple of questions from some of my clients and some of the ladies I see, but one of them is from me, and this is just out of pure curiosity. So when we talk about toxic relationships, we feel, especially with my younger clients in their 20s at the moment, what we find is that they do their online dating, and a lot of the guys are just tap and gap it, right? They just make it very clear they're not afraid to go, hey, look, I'm just in it for the sex, fine, and that happens. But I'm interested to know from the males that you see that are coming to see you, from a female's perspective at the moment, it does tend to see that there are a lot of I feel, I'm just going to say it, but there's a lot of toxic relationships, a lot of toxic relationships from like the male calling all the shots, the male being the toxic one, or all that kind of stuff. I'd love to know from the other side of the fence what's happening over there with the guys that you see. Are they saying the same thing?
I mean, in terms of the like that dating element or relationships in general?
Well, both. Like, let's quickly talk about the dating element. Like.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like I'm a little bit more removed from that game, I suppose. But from what I can observe, because I have not been in the dating game personally for quite some time, so I feel like an old man in that one. But look, I think kind of yes and no. Like I think it's very easy, depending on where you're coming from, just to look at the other and go, well, it's them. It's like, it's fucking disempowering. Like, it's always me too. And, this is kind of back to one of the points earlier. Like, it's very easy. In fact, to your point, Barbara, it's often very challenging. But, in the big scheme of things, it's reasonably easy to set out and go, here's what I want in a partner, and here's the traits and qualities that I want. What's harder is, here's who I want to be. And that's the place to start. Then I can start to actually understand what I want in a relationship and what I want to create in a partnership. And then I can start to figure out, well, what do I want in a partner? So I think, I kind of come back to this place. So yes, I see a lot of men struggling with relationships. I mean, shit, I see some wildly, like fucking sad and, infuriating examples of fathers being completely fucked over in family courts and all this kind of stuff, false accusations of abuse and all these kind of things, men that I will like, and in the past have written character references for and these kind of things. So there's always, let's call it other sides to the equation. But I think let's call it toxicity, can play out in different ways. I think one of the things that we've seen traditionally is that a lot of toxic shit that will happen from a male's corner can be more to do with strength and power, right? And the misuse of, and I'll very easily speak to what I see in a lot of men is the lack of security and power within will often go out into the world and try and claim security from others or power from others. And that's what can often happen through, sometimes physical strength or violence or that kind of toxic behavior. And then doesn't matter who you are. If there's this lack of security and lack of power within, we're going to try and claim it elsewhere. And so how I will tend to see it, and certainly what I will see in some of my guys who might be in those kinds of situations, is the flip is often through the emotional element, where women will be using the emotional power and manipulation over. But it's still often the person is trying to get some semblance of security and power externally in the world because of the lack within. And I think, how it looks and manifests between men and women can be, in that different form. Because at the same time, and saying a lot of men who may be in that situation might be going to the strength and power over. Then there's also, kind of the quintessential nice guy who is more, I would say, in a kind of toxic feminine mode of being, where by nature the nice guy is manipulation. It's a wildly insecure dude who is desperate for people to like him. The idea of not being liked is wildly terrifying because it really speaks to this deep belief of like, I'm not good enough. And so by default, what the nice guy is doing, which is really challenging for the nice guy to really hear, is I'm trying to manage people's perceptions of me to avoid taking a hit to my self-esteem. And so by its very nature, that is manipulative. The intention is not an evil thing. The intention is I'm insecure and I'm trying to get people to like me so I can feel more secure. It's not going to fucking work. But, that's not that kind of like overt power, strength over others. It's that more kind of, and I say toxic feminine in that kind of sense. It's more the emotional level. Obviously, for a lot of guys, they don't have that depth of emotionality to even get to that place, which is why it comes in that kind of very simple, thick strength, power over others mode. Is that?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I see a lot of women that it's like you said, it's about the person. So I see a lot of females that, do really want to settle down or meet someone, but they really get treated like shit. And one of the things that I say, and they can't believe I say, how he shows up on the first day is the best you'll ever get. Like, the person will show who they are. And we tend to miss it and hold on and go, oh, but they might get better. And you know what? Some people may. Let's not say to the 5% whatever people that do the work and then come out the other end and whatever. But I'm talking in general that I see a lot of young girls that come in and they are just like 23, 24. They are just broken because they just a beautiful young woman that have such a pure heart and they give everything to this Tom, Dick and Harry for them to be seeing 4 or 5 other girls. No, babe, I'm not seeing anyone. No, you're being silly. No, that's your jacket that you left here last week. Clearly it's not. And all that kind of stuff. So I see a lot of that. And I see a lot of girls going, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand. And all that kind of. So I see that heavily on a day-to-day basis.
Of course, yeah. And so that can be challenging, right? Because again, like I'll say this and ask for a lot of grace as I say it, but like regardless of who you are, like who you're attracting isn't just about the person. Like there's always an invitation to look in the mirror. And I can have a lot of compassion for like perhaps one, those dudes have not learnt the most amount of respect around dating and like who do you want to be? Are you want to be someone who has fuck all integrity and people can't depend on, but at the same time, like who are you attracting and why? And perhaps a lot of these girls haven't had the most amazing role modeling of healthy, mature, strong, integrity based men. And potentially one of the big things that is sitting at the heart of that is I have such low self-worth that I allow myself to accept the crumbs of people who are in the same place but it looks different.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why they come and see me and we work on that, all that understanding why they're attracting what they're attracting. But they just feel like, Barbara, why is this happening to all my friends, all of me? It's all that kind of
yeah. And so, if you think about to the point before, for those men, let's say, who are potentially living that way, quite likely, hey, because guess what? Being that dude in a different iteration is this similar sense of like low self-worth and like who I am is measured on XYZ, my ability to provide, protect, and procreate. And at that young age of our teenage years, and if you haven't, and this is one of the things for me that is incredibly sad and challenging and worrying, but like we don't have that wonderful modeling into manhood, but we also don't have like actual rites of passage and transition in to manhood. It's not amazing for women, but there is a physical transformation that goes on when women get their period. Men don't have anything. So it's like you get a room, 1,000 men in a room from various ages and say, when did you become a man? And you watch the fucking crickets.
Wow.
And here's probably one of the more common answers. I still don't think I'm a man.
Boom.
And I have heard that from men well over 50.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
So what often happens is if we haven't truly transitioned into being a man, which it involves like a lot of actual change, like the little boy in me has to die. And so I go into this, version of things, I suppose, to speak to the real fact that a lot of men in growing biological male bodies, definitely in our 20s, but often well beyond that, are still running that adolescent psychology. And what is very, very like incredibly real for the adolescent male is you are measured on your ability to your physical prowess, your sexual prowess, right? And then at some point, your ability to like get a good job and earn money and get status and power. That's it. And then I get the kudos, and then I get the respect, right? And then I will be good enough. And so what that generally looks like is a couple of things, right? Like diving into work, earning money, getting flashy things, and woman in conquest. And it's central to the identity. Like that is the thing that will get me enough. And it's the kudos, it's the being wanted, But it's all really about this lack within, which of course we might have learned through upbringing and all the things that we've been through, neglect and all this kind of stuff, bad homes, abuse, whatever. And this societal idea that you need to be this perfect thing that has all the money and all the status and all the right. And we're chasing, the end of a rainbow. But of course, the real shame is that a lot of the result of that is shitty behaviors. People are affected by our shitty behaviors, which of course creates more shitty behaviors, and we get a lot of that stuff just kind of continuing, right? Until at some point, hopefully, we choose to stop it.
Jeez. Okay, I've got a question for you, and this is one that I'm sure you get asked all the time, but it's something that did come up a lot when I put out questions to say I was talking to you today. And one of them was, males in general really intimidated by a strong woman? And strong women could be, it's not really physical these days, that ship sailed. It's more, she's not afraid to say what she wants to. It could be, successful in her job or just really headstrong and not. How do I? I'm sure you get what I'm trying to ask.
I know what you mean, most definitely. So again, like hopefully, perhaps frustratingly, the listeners might get that I'll generally explore these questions with there's a lot of it depends. Right, because it's kind of a yes and no, like definitely. Like there are men who struggle with that. And of course, to your explanation there, actually what is quote a strong woman, because I think there's been this big, in my own observations and, through obviously a lot of conversations and experience, there's been a lot of pressure placed on females, young girls and women to be quote strong. It's the new thing that men had. You need to be independent. You need to, you shouldn't need anyone or anything, which I think is humans need others. So that idea alone is fucking insane.
Yeah.
Right. But that's a huge pressure, but what if I actually want to really celebrate, for example, being a mother and raising a child? Well, no, you should be strong, have a career. So there's a lot of really heavy, challenging information in that. So the reason I say that is because I have personally seen a lot of quote strong women who I would reflect on as I'm going to muddle my way through this, Barbara, so please have some compassion. Essentially embodying the masculine to their own detriment, and therefore to the detriment of any kind of male to female relationship that they're going to want to get in. Because there has to be polarity, and the masculine will butt heads with the masculine.
Yeah.
So what I see in this a lot of the time is a woman who's had to, often, through all of that stuff that we just talked about, like the pressure and the conditioning, and maybe had to because of there wasn't anyone to look after her, and she had to step into that role. And if I can't trust this, then who am I going to trust? I'll just fucking do it myself or look after myself. And of course, that exacerbates it. It's through self-protection and all that kind of stuff. If she's in that mode and she wants to meet a strong man, then guess what they're going to do? Butt heads. And what that might look like is men is challenged by strong women. So like maybe, but what is the ultimate aim for, quote, strong women when it comes to getting a relationship with a man? Do you want a really, really soft man? I would suggest no, but there has to be a polarity. So that's generally what it's going to attract. Now, I'm not saying it to dehumanize anyone, but to make the point that, and that's also not to say, oh, then you just need to not be strong. No, I think strength is something that we get to expand and bring more beauty and nuance to, both for men, but women as well. You know, because strength looks many ways.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's so much strength in the feminine. You know, the ability and willingness to soften and to, you know, receive and to like show men in the masculine, like the playful, creative, emotive way of life. Because of course there's risk in softening. There's courage in softening. That's strong. So again, I say this to potentially invite exploration in that, which is not to say then men just get to be strong in the old school way. And of course, hopefully we're getting the nuance in that.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's also the challenge for a lot of men. But the masculine will butt heads with the masculine, which is not to say that two, quote, strong people can't be in a relationship together. But what does that look like in the individual? And what does it look like in the couple? So then, yes, to all the earlier points and potentially sounding contradictory to that, there are going to be men, I believe, to some of the points, who are insecure, who don't feel, therefore, secure and grounded and strong and solid within themselves, who will be intimidated by or perhaps feel wildly challenged by someone who presents that way. And when I say presents that way, because a lot of, let's say, the men who look strong and like they got the shit together, you know, present that way, but it's also
100%.
acting as someone who has high self-worth and not actually having it.
Yeah.
And so that's where then can be that like, well, yeah, he's either going to butt heads and fuck you and you're just this, or you know, there's going to be that polarity where he'll soften and be passive. And that's, I would suspect, and I've heard this a lot, one of the most unattractive things for any woman, but certainly for, you know, a quote strong woman. Like, well, if your only mode is to be in your masculine, then guess what you're going to attract? Someone who sits into their feminine, because there has to be the polarity. Or, of course, that early attraction of someone who's similar, but then at some point, it's going to butt heads.
Yeah. Well, not gives in, but it softens and molds to what it needs to be.
And so I think part of the idea really in the invitation there is, you know, all humans have a masculine and feminine aspect to them. Generally speaking, more men tend to have more masculine, but we've learnt different ways of being, right? And so then we tend to end up in this spot. A lot of men have learnt this very simple, narrow version of the masculine, this kind of hyper masculine, strong, stoic thing that we've spoken about. And as it turns out now, a lot of women have learnt that as well. One narrow thing doesn't serve anyone. You know, like a lot of men really learn to embrace their feminine and to be able to sit in their soft, creative, playful, you know, caregiving side. Like if you want to be a parent, good luck not having that.
Yeah.
But not all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of those guys probably also need to expand their masculine, like actual strength. Not strength that looks like strength but has no depth.
Yeah.
You know, resilience, determination, leadership, like intentionality, living with purpose, setting direction. These are expansions that a lot of men get to step into. And so I would kind of offer the same for women.
I love that. And as women, it's changed now, but before we were taught that men are the provider and we stay at home and do all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really confusing, even for guys. I like when the word gentleman. I love, especially when I am out and about, and I'm talking like men in their 70s or 80s, and they're like, "Oh, hello, dear," and they open the door for me, and I'm like, "Oh," like that. I believe that that's something that's really should be nurtured and held on to from being a gentleman, because it's such a beautiful. There's nothing better than a guy of any age. "Oh, you go first," or opening the door for you, or those small things that don't cost anything. And I don't want them to get lost. But as women, it's like you said, you can be someone that does all the things and I know many relationships where the wife or the mother or the woman in the household, the lady in the household does everything because he just won't do it. Like, if anyone's going to do it, I've got to do it properly because it's done properly. Like, he just says he'll do it. He'll fix the screw on the gate, but he never does. So I'll just do it, and I'll just do it, right? And I wanted to ask you, because biologically, we're hardwired to that's why we can remember. And if any guys are listening to this, they'll be like, yeah, no shit. Like, we can have an argument with our partner 10 years ago, and today I can bring up the time, the date, what we spoke about, and that, like, and people and guys are like, holy shit, how do you remember that? Like, whatever it was, the green jersey or the one time that this happened. But it's because biologically we're hardwired to go and find where the berries are. And where are the berries? And we've got to remember that route when we come back with our children. But we've also got to remember, are they the poisonous ones? Are those ones are okay to eat? And so that's why we're hardwired for that, where men are hardwired. And that's our brain and our bodies are built that way, to kill meat, bring it home, dump it. Here's meat. I bought meat. You eat it. I'm the provider. And I think that's still really inbuilt in us because it's our brain now wiring. And I'm interested to know, how do men, it kind of ties back to when we first started talking today, how men feel about themselves, because obviously there's all these mixed roles that are happening. And when we're biologically wired to do certain things a certain way, how is it to be a man in today's world where not only are we confused at what men should be doing, like, the beautiful things like opening the doors and on a first date, he pays even though we offer. Like, I think all that stuff is still really important because it's such a beautiful thing. Like,
yeah, I mean, look, I think at the heart of those, like kind of quintessential gentlemanly things is respect.
Yeah.
But, it's probably not that hard to see how a lot of those things have been dropped and lost when the message has been equality and women shouldn't need men and looking after.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, then where the fuck is my place? What do I do? What role do I have?
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say, oh, well, then women should be subservient and men should look after them. Of course not, right? But let's have some nuance, people. And therein lies part of the struggle. We fucking struggle with nuance, right? And so I think, at the heart, like, of that provider, like the hunter, and the essence of the hunter is to provide for those under his care, to keep them safe. And so that's really what is very innate in men. We want to provide and look after and make sure those in our care are happy and safe. Sometimes it looks really fucking messed up. Why? Because of the shit that we've been through and the beliefs that we hold about ourselves now, but also all the conditioning that we've learned now, right? Like, we've learned that the providing is get the best job, earn the most money, collect the most things. And so we dive into that because the other piece involved in that is men, therefore, there's so much purpose in providing for those in our care and that we love. And so men need purpose. We need to apply ourselves, our energy, our life force to things that bring meaning. And so this job might be fucking soul destroying, but it provides for my family. There's so much fucking meaning in that. And so my invitation to men would be like, absolutely. And remember that you provide other things as well, and that you get to derive purpose from other things as well. You provide love and attention and presence. You provide an example of what a man is. you provide an example of navigating conflict and living in relationships and facing challenges. And you can derive purpose from other ways of looking after your family and other ways of being of service in your community and to yourself. And so for me, that's kind of the whole picture. A man can't be one narrow little track, or there will be consequences internally and generally externally.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm just having a quick read through. I just want the ladies to know that are listening to this is you help guys. I think this was in your book or your website, I wasn't too sure, but some of the courses that you do and how you work with men, you help them to discover their personal brand, cooking skills, how to act on a date, and how to read your partner, which I think is actually such a cool thing, because I know growing up, we're not taught things about how to be a woman, and I'm sure guys are the same. And here you are on this platform giving guys these tools to help them be a better man. So I think it's such a cool thing. When I read that, I was like, that is so cool.
So what I'll say is that would have been in my book, I think. Now, for a little bit of context, so I wrote the book, I wrote it in 2012, kind of got edited through 2013, and we published it in 2014. And my work has evolved and moved on a fair bit since then. But that's at the heart of it. It was really about helping men, first of all, like look within, understand themselves, and what it is to be, like a man of breadth and depth. And of course, like our physical body is our vehicle for how we experience the world, and so looking after it is very bloody important. So that's where a lot of that stuff was at that time.
Yeah.
But now it's my courses are more around, confidence and being a better partner and, like understanding yourself, getting some clarity, getting your shit together. And, I have something called the Everyday Legends Academy, and that's kind of my big hub where men come together and we, do some significant work across 6 months and beyond, and, understanding themselves, like who are you actually, and how and why have you got to this point? Like we have to understand this picture that we're building, like your life as a man is this complex jigsaw puzzle. And often we have kind of learnt this idea of the picture that we should be putting together, but it's often not ours. And so therefore it's not clear, it's kind of cloudy. And so we have to really get clear on like, well, who do you want to be? What's the picture that you want for your life? And we also need all the pieces. And so many guys are missing half the fucking pieces. Like we need to figure out how you got to this point, what has formed you. Then we can actually start to sit back and go, okay, I know what picture I'm building and I know what I'm dealing with. And now I can actually pragmatically go about it. But so far, we're kind of like, no, you've got to be busy. You've got to be productive. You've got to be achieving. You've got to be, creating accomplishments and status. And so we just become very good at grabbing a piece from the box and putting it at the table. But the strategy to do that doesn't mean shit if you don't have a picture and you're missing half the pieces. So really, for me, it's about helping me understand themselves, getting all the pieces so we can build out the picture.
Okay.
And there's therefore lots of little things in there about, of course, themselves and relationships and so on.
I've got two more for you. One of them is really important to me, and it's something that so for me, part of what I've always had, and it's still, because it's a value to me, but it's also a value to my partner, is I like a man that takes pride in himself. And that can look in many different ways. He doesn't have to look a certain way, because I used to be married to a bodybuilder, and that was my background. So a lot of people think, oh, you were with him for his body. Fucking no. And it's interesting because people can't believe that. I don't see this in a man. I see this first, this, and then that creates the package. But it's interesting, people are so quick to go, oh, bullshit, And something that I want to ask you is, because I get it a lot from my end, it's like, I just want a guy that just takes pride in how he looks. And instantly I get a negative voice in my ear from many women. Oh, it's not about how they look. It's not about this and not about that. And I'm like, hey, not all guys that take pride in their appearance are dicks. And that's something I wanted to just put out on the table here. It's not true, is it?
No, and look, I think, again, one of the things that we potentially fall into there is making one thing everything. Like a well-balanced human. Let's start there. And so there's lots of pieces to that.
Yeah.
And so taking pride in one's appearance doesn't mean all I care about is my appearance. Although, of course, it can for some people. And hopefully those people can, find a way of exploring some depths, because that's reasonably shallow. If your life is on the surface, you have a surface level life. So, yeah, I mean, what someone looks like for a lot of people is a big part of the package to your language, I think, is a beautiful piece. How much of the package is totally up to the individual. But if it's everything, then where's the depth? And if that's what someone is, reacting to, then potentially that's what they're struggling with, and potentially projecting some of their own shit. Well, then therefore people are only going to see me for my looks or lack thereof, and potentially how I judge myself. And that's not fair. Well, it's like, well, then don't go for people who are only interested in the looks.
Yeah, it's just an interesting.
But don't rule them out.
Yeah.
Because of course, taking pride in oneself, if I don't have pride in myself, if I don't have respect for myself, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to need other people to prop it up for me. And that is some self-indulgent bullshit. It's my job, first and foremost, to establish a sense of pride and self-respect. And then other people get to respond to that. Now, they might not dig on that. And you know what? All the best with finding your people. If you're not my person, you're not my person. That's okay.
Yeah, that's what I say too. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to put that in there. Now, the last one is, a lot of men in our lives can say, I'm all right, I'm fine, I'm okay, when we clearly know that they're unhappy or they're depressed or they might be having some anxiety. How can we support the men in our life? If we're with someone in our life that is going through this, can you give us just a couple of tips on how we can actually genuinely help this person?
Okay, so I'll start here. First of all, so one of the things that came to mind with one of the things you said, Barbara, was like, first of all, I'll invite some compassion, and that might be like, of course, but let me flip the table really quickly to potentially a different scenario. He can sense that something's wrong, and he's saying, "Hey, babe, what's wrong?" "Nothing, it's fine." And she won't say what's fucking wrong. Now, that's not to say you need to communicate, although it will fucking help him if you go, "Here's the problem." He'll go, "Cool, I want to fix it because I want you to be okay." But to have some compassion, like, okay, maybe there's times where I don't open up and he's wanting me to actually share what's going on. Now, the intention behind it might be different, but there's an opportunity there to have a little bit of compassion. I'm like, oh, okay, right. Then how do we help him? Here's another frustrating one. You might not be able to. Like, you just might not be able to.
Yeah.
As much as your heart might want to. So I would say the best thing and the way to approach it is, how can I potentially invite him to open up some more, to share? And the language is really important. So, women will tend to use feeling language, men will tend to use thinking language. So you ask him, how's he feeling? He'll probably be like, fine. Say, what are you thinking about? You'll probably get a different answer. How are you getting on at the moment? What are you thinking about our relationship at the moment? What are you thinking about your work at the moment? And you might get a different answer. But also, one of the things that he's quite likely learned over the longest time is that to share anything, real or deep or beneath the surface or emotional is weak. So he's potentially fighting against a disused limb that is weak and grey and white and pale and is atrophied. It's got no strength. He doesn't even know how to fucking access it. So, like, careful on the expectations of him having emotional conversation, perhaps like you might have with your girlfriends from the get-go. Like, really allow it. So therefore it will not feel safe. It will feel wildly vulnerable, potentially, for him to start going down that route. So one of the things that I would suggest is express to him, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I would like. And I would love for us to be able to talk about some of these things when you feel safe and happy to. But you also get to set boundaries. Like, what is not going to work for me is if we never have conversations about what's going on in our internal world. So when you feel ready and happy to, knowing that it might never be a perfect time, I would love you to come and approach me in a way that you're happy to, feel safe to, etc. And that invitation is very important, because then he gets a step towards it, versus trying to make him do it. This is the time we have to do it in. There's potentially a bunch of his shit which will get in the way, which will be like, fuck you, I don't want to.
Yeah.
So that invitation, now of course the thing with the invitation is I have to let go of control, that he might not do it, and of course he might not, and therefore you can't make him, right, which is kind of the earlier point. And that's when you get to potentially communicate boundaries and so on, going, well, look, this isn't going to work for me if you're not going to, etc. But using the languages of like, ownership and your own experiences and what you want. Like, I want to be able to see your heart and see you're struggling and see all of you. And then you need to be able to be ready to see that if he brings it, because that's obviously the challenge for a lot of women. It's like, holy shit, my partner shared his depths and cried and fuck, there's another challenge. So again, I think if we expand out the expectations, be very careful on him, opening up everything in the first request. And it could be like, yeah, but I've been asking for years. But if you've been asking the same way for years, then you're starting from scratch. Mm-hmm. So patience with him. Go softly with him. Make it safe for him to venture into something that could be very, very vulnerable. And then have some patience.
And if he does cry, sit with him. Just sit. And just let it happen, because he's human. Just like us, it doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean that he's broken, but doesn't mean that, he needs to be fixed. Sometimes it can just be a release. And if he's never done it before, it could be really traumatic for both of you, because, when we all do that ugly cry, or we've all done that, it comes whether we like it or not. It comes to a point where our body's like, I just need to release this. As you said, you can stuff shit down for so long, and you may know someone, or you may have done that wrong time, wrong place, ugly cry, and it all just comes out. He may experience that, and to give him space, like you said, just to sit there with him and just not fix it, just sit there and allow that action to purge and to happen. And then
so that was the episode with Mike Campbell. My recording on my laptop stopped. That's why the podcast kind of stopped suddenly. But if you'd like to reach out to Mike or find out more about what he does, visit him on his website, mikecampbell.com.au. You can email Mike at contact@mikecampbell.com.au, or you can reach out to him on Instagram at Mike Campbell MC, and he's on Facebook as well. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it has inspired you on your self-care journey. Please feel free to share this with a friend and subscribe over on Apple Podcast. I really love hearing your feedback, so guys, please feel free to write a review on Apple and let me know which part of this episode resonated with you the most. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about Self-Care Studio or the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, self_care_studio, or on my website, selfcare.barbarathompson.com.au. Really look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Look after you. And I'll catch you soon. Bye!